So for step 2, you're asked to characterize Dante and characterize some of the characters within the book and how their characters are developed and take a closer look. So when you characterize things, there are some things you need to specifically look at and, draw attention to in your vocabulary as you're writing. You need to use some of the specific words. The definition of characterization is a portrayal or description of made-up people, characters in a book, a movie, or a play. So any portrayal of a character. And in our case, Dante is also a character because he's the author and he's in the book itself. So there's direct characterization. This is a term that you would include in some of your writings, whatever assignment you choose for characterization. You would include the word direct characterization. You would find text examples where the author characterizes a character by simply telling the reader what the character is like. This is just how they are. That's direct. The generous baker handed the bread to the homeless woman. So we know he's generous because they say he's generous. But the indirect characterization, and that's another type of characterization to consider in your writing, where it's revealed information about the character through his or her thoughts and actions. They think this, they do this, so then we infer how that character is. For example, the woman looks hungry, thought the man in the white apron as he gazed across the street. He opened the door to his shop. The air was heavy with the yeasty smell of freshly prepared bread. Stooping down to peer into the window of the piping hot iron stove, he saw that the loaves inside were perfectly done. And as he pulled them from the oven, he thought about the time in his life when he could not afford to eat. Carefully wrapped the loaf in his clean kitchen towel and carried it across the street to the ragged, hungry woman. So it tells us he's generous, that he's thinking about his own personal weaknesses and times that he's needed help. And so that's indirect characterization just by what he's thinking and doing. So then we have a static character. You'll have to choose between static and dynamic. A character who does not change is a static character. They don't develop, they don't grow, they stay the same throughout the entire story. Scar in The Lion King stays the same. He's kind of nasty and mean throughout the whole thing. He was just as mean, jealous, hateful, and evil at the end of The Lion King as he was at the beginning, and he never learned from his mistakes, and he didn't grow as a character. That makes him a static character. So dynamic character. You choose between static and dynamic. You choose between one of those two. And a dynamic character is a character who changes, develops, and grows throughout the action of a book. So what happens to them changes them and they grow. Like Simba. Simba started out as a child and then became a teenager, and he had to face fears and his past in order to become a great leader. And Simba is faced with different challenges, like a hero is, making him dynamic and changing as a character. So we have allusions, which is a reference to a famous person, place, or thing in the story, and they often come from a sacred text like the Bible or Quran. Allusions only work when people can identify and understand what the reference is. So as we're looking at characterizing certain characters, we're going to look at how they refer back to, what allusions that are made. So we look at 3 Ds when we're looking at how characters are developed. We look at diction, what word choices are used. Diction is the word choice that establishes the tone about the character. We look at a dialect, and a dialect is a version of language that the author uses to write in or speak. Maybe a character speaks in a specific dialect. And we look at dialogue, what is being said between the two characters in a conversation in a book, play, or a movie. You're going to look at figurative language. Figurative language can tell you a lot about a character. A lot of times it makes comparisons. It's imaginative. It also gives you a little bit of a better idea about the character in the indirect. When you use indirect characterization, you look at similes, metaphors, analogy, hyperboles, and personification. And at this point, you really know most of those. You should be familiar with all of those terms. The point of view is also important. The vantage point from which a story is told. So the point of view of Dante tells us a lot about him. That's why one of your assignments is to what impact his religion has on his writing, or the politics has on his writing. Okay, so another type of character that you're going to look at is round and flat characters. A round character, you have to choose. Just like dynamic and static, you choose one. You choose one between the round and flat. So round is well developed, has many traits, both good and bad. They're not easily defined because we know so many details about them. They're realistic and lifelike. Most major characters are round. Flat characters are not very well developed. They don't have many traits, easily defined in a single sentence because we know little about them, and most minor characters are flat. So just to review some of the terms that you need to be using in your assignments for step 2, you need to be using the terms round or flat. I use a beach ball for round because it's lots of personality traits. Yellow for happy, green for spiritual, blue for depressed, red for short-tempered. So each color could represent a different character trait, and so therefore a character that is round is similar to a beach ball. A flat character is a character constructed just about one idea, so I use a piece of paper to help symbolize that because it's just kind of a one single side thing. So you choose between round and flat. These should be mentioned as you analyze characters in Dante's Inferno. Dynamic or static, those are the other ones you'll choose from. A dynamic character is like a butterfly because they change during the book, something happens to them, they learn and grow. Static character stays the same, straight line, so static. So you need to choose between those terms. You also need to choose between, you also need to mention indirect characterization as well as direct characterization, and one of the things that, some of those things you'll look at would be speech, an example from the text of what they say and what do we learn about the character from what they say. Their thoughts, and that would be direct. So that would be direct, would be their speech, or their dialogue. You might even mention the term dialogue. Their thoughts, that would be indirect. So an example of their thoughts and what do you learn about the character. The effects they have on others, that is indirect. Example from the text where they have an effect on others and what we learn about it. Their actions, that would be direct. Oh, I'm sorry, indirect. My apologies. That would be indirect, an example from the text and what we learn about it, and their looks, which would be they're direct. Like it looks like they're doing this or they're actually doing this. So example from the text and what we learn. So all of those are things you need to, and when I read your assignment, if you do not have static or dynamic or round or flat, if you don't have some of those terms in indirect and direct, dialogue, diction, those are words that you need to be analyzing. If those words aren't there, you will be given the assignment back and asked to redo it. So make sure that you use the notes from this assignment to help you develop your lessons.